Nobody could steal watch footage of Mike Tyson in his prime, and you're not looking at a boxer. You're looking at a glitch in the sport. A man built like a tank, moving like a middleweight, disappearing and reappearing inside your guard before you even register he's gone. We've had punchers. We've had pressure fighters. We've had freaks of speed and freaks of power. But nobody, not one heavyweight since, has thrown himself into a fight the way Tyson did. The style had a name, peekaboo. For one man, it turned boxing into target practice. And then, almost overnight, it vanished from the sport entirely. No champion has run it since. No contender has cracked it. So either it was a trap disguised as genius, too dangerous, too demanding for a mortal body to sustain, or it only ever worked because of the one freak of nature standing inside it. And to answer that question, we're not starting with Tyson. We're starting with the man who built the machine before he ever found his engine. The architect Cus D'Amato wasn't chasing trophies in the 1950s. He was solving an engineering problem. His fighters kept running into the same wall, shorter men, shorter arms, standing across the ring from opponents who could hit them and step back before getting hit in return. Height and reach were supposed to be destiny in boxing. D'Amato refused to accept that. He didn't want to teach guys how to punch harder. He wanted to build something that made an opponent's height meaningless, a system where the taller man's reach became a liability instead of a weapon. He looked at conventional boxing and saw a sport stuck in slow motion. Fighters standing tall, squared up, trading on a predictable rhythm. He wanted violence with no rhythm at all. Head movement so constant you couldn't find an angle. Feet that closed distance in a blink and vanished just as fast. Combinations that landed before the brain across the ring had finished processing the first punch. That obsession became peekaboo, a style with nothing still about it. Where old school boxing was measured and upright, this was perpetual motion, slipping, rolling, ducking under leather that was already too late. The prototype D'Amato's proof of concept walked through the door in the form of Floyd Patterson. In 1956, at just 21, Patterson became the youngest heavyweight champion in history, a record Tyson would later break. He did it at 6 feet even and barely 190 pounds, dimensions that should have been a death sentence against bigger men. Instead, peekaboo let him vanish inside punching range and detonate combinations before his opponents could reset. A few years later, Jose Torres carried pieces of the system to a light heavyweight title in 1965, blending it with his own loose, Latin-flavored upper body rhythm and a guard held high. Two champions, two different bodies, one shared blueprint. But neither man pushed the style to its outer limit. That would take a third student, one D'Amato hadn't even met yet. In 1979, a troubled 13-year-old from Brooklyn named Mike Tyson landed in D'Amato's gym. Nobody watching that day could have guessed they were witnessing the birth of the most feared heavyweight the sport would ever produce. What made Tyson terrifying wasn't just heart or aggression. It was that his physical blueprint seemed custom-built for the exact system D'Amato had spent decades refining. Hand speed that heavyweights simply don't have. Power generated from impossible angles most fighters never train for. A neck strong enough to make his head movement look almost inhuman. Legs that could close 8 feet of canvas in a heartbeat. And a center of gravity sitting at just 5 feet 10 inches. Absurdly low for the division. D'Amato took legal guardianship of the kid and rebuilt him from the studs up. Every day, every session, one obsession, drilling peekaboo until it wasn't technique anymore. It was reflex. By the time Tyson turned pro in 1985, the result wasn't just good. It was terrifying. A fighter who was simultaneously impossible to hit and impossible to survive. Then, tragedy. D'Amato died in November of that same year, just as his creation was stepping into the professional ranks. But the machine he'd built didn't need him anymore. It was already running. Anatomy of a wrecking ball strip. Away the legend and look at the mechanics. 5 pieces that made Tyson's version of peekaboo a nightmare to solve. The shell forget the extended lead hand you see in classic boxing stances. Tyson kept both gloves stacked high beside his face, peering out from behind them, hence the name. A defensive wall against anything straight, while his eyes stayed locked on the target, the motion. His head was never in the same spot twice, weaving, slipping, rolling, bobbing, constantly relocating while still grinding forward. You couldn't time what wouldn't hold still. The footwork. No bouncing, no circling like a conventional boxer. D'Amato called it shifting, a hidden transfer of weight that let Tyson fire full power hooks off either foot, regardless of his stance in that exact instant. The angles. By dipping side to side as he advanced, Tyson manufactured punching lines opponents had never trained to defend. Most famously, a right hook to the ribs setting up a right uppercut nobody saw arriving. The explosion. He didn't stalk people down like a pressure fighter grinding out a decision. He erased distance in a single violent burst, slipping a jab and firing back before his opponent's brain had even confirmed the miss. 5 separate mechanisms, one seamless weapon. Brutal offense wrapped inside airtight defense. The fear before the fight. The most underrated part of Tyson's arsenal never touched an opponent. It lived in their head before the bell even rang. Muscles coiled, gloves stacked high, rolling forward like a storm that refused to slow down. Plenty of men lost before throwing a single punch. And that wasn't an accident. D'Amato believed fighting was 3/4 mental, so he engineered Tyson to be a walking psychological weapon. The black trunks with no robe theatrics, no socks, a soft voice contrasted against pure menace. Every detail was designed to plant doubt in an opponent's mind before the opening bell. Stack that intimidation on top of a defense that couldn't be cracked and an offense that could end things in seconds, and you get something the sport had never fully processed. A fighter who felt unbeatable before the fight even started. Cracks in the armor. Nothing stays undefeated forever. In 1990, Buster Douglas delivered one of the greatest upsets boxing has ever seen. And it wasn't just a knockout, it was the first visible crack in the peekaboo system. The truth is, the drift had started years earlier. Without D'Amato's discipline after his 1985 death, Tyson had already begun sliding away from the pure mechanics that made him champion. Add the chaos of his marriage to Robin Givens, a criminal conviction, and a prison sentence in 1992 that swallowed what should have been his athletic prime. And the machine had years of maintenance it never received. By his 1995 comeback, Tyson could still knock a man out, but the artistry was gone. The head movement had gone stiff. The shell wasn't as tight. What used to be surgical had become raw power thrown in straight lines. Then the losses stacked up. Holyfield twice, including the infamous ear-biting chaos, and Lennox Lewis in 2002. The verdict was in. The style that once made him a ghost had quietly disappeared years before. Why nobody rebuilt it? So here's the real question. If peekaboo was this devastating, why didn't the entire heavyweight division adopt it? The engine required was absurd. This wasn't a style you could half commit to. It demanded constant motion, a low stance held for 12 rounds, and a gas tank most heavyweights simply don't carry. You're not just avoiding punches, you're staying compressed and explosive for 36 minutes straight. The sport moved the other direction. Modern heavyweight boxing rewards height and a controlling jab, especially with the rise of tall, technically polished fighters out of Eastern Europe. Against that blueprint, a peekaboo fighter has to work twice as hard just to close the gap without eating a jab on the way in. The knowledge died with the teacher. After D'Amato passed, and as his disciples Teddy Atlas and Kevin Rooney drifted from the sport, the fine details of the system started fading with them. Even a gifted fighter can't execute a style nobody's left alive to teach properly. But underneath all of that is the simplest answer. Tyson wasn't a style, he was a one-off. The explosiveness, the power, the aggression, the compact frame built for exactly this system, the footwork nobody else could replicate. You could hand another fighter the exact blueprint and still not get the same result because the blueprint needed Tyson's body to function. Echoes, not ghosts. The pure form may be extinct, but fragments survived. Fighters like Dwight Muhammad Qawi and later David Tua borrowed pieces of the high guard and the relentless head movement. Down in the lighter divisions, Timothy Bradley blended the peekaboo guard with more lateral footwork to make a hybrid version work for his frame. Even Canelo Alvarez, nothing like a peekaboo fighter stylistically, mastered the exact weight-shifting mechanic D'Amato pioneered, letting him crack hooks off either foot regardless of position. Walk into gyms around the world today, and you'll still find trainers teaching pieces of it, especially to shorter fighters who need a way to get past taller opposition. The logic behind the system never stopped being sound. It's the complete package that disappeared. The verdict. In the end, the peekaboo style isn't really a story about technique. It's a story about one impossibly specific convergence. A genius trainer and a once-in-a-generation body arriving in the same gym at the same moment in history. Burn brightly enough, and there's nothing left to sustain the fire once it's gone. Could heavyweight boxing ever produce another true peekaboo champion? Everything about the modern game says no. Different athletes, different rules, a different sport entirely from the one D'Amato was trying to out-engineer in the 1950s. But that doesn't erase what he and Tyson built together. For one explosive stretch of the late 1980s, they made heavyweight boxing look like a puzzle that had finally been solved. The style may be gone. The fighter who perfected it never will be. What do you think? Could anyone ever run this system again? Or did it die with Tyson? Drop it in the comments.